crashes onto the pavement. Neon lights flicker. A nightclub hallway echoes with shouting. A man backs away, breathing hard. His voice shakes as he tries to argue, tries to threaten, tries to win. But the room suddenly goes silent. Footsteps approach, slow, measured, unstoppable. A black suit, calm eyes, no shouting, no wasted words, just presence. The man realizes too late. Arguments are not won by volume, they are won by control. And standing in front of him is a man who mastered control long ago. John Wick. One look, one sentence, and the fight is already over. Not because he screamed louder, but because everyone in the room already knew the outcome. But that power didn't start in that hallway. It started years earlier, in silence, long before the name Baba Yaga spread through the criminal underworld, long before fear followed him into every room. Because the real weapon of John Wick was never the gun. It was discipline, psychological discipline, the kind that makes a man control emotions when everyone else loses control. In negotiation psychology, researchers often say the person who stays calm controls the frame of the conversation. Studies referenced in the book Never Split the Difference by former FBI negotiator Chris Voss explains something fascinating. In high conflict conversations, emotional reactions weaken influence, while calm authority increases it. The human brain instinctively trusts the person who appears most in control. And that's exactly what makes someone like John Wick terrifying. When chaos explodes around him, he doesn't react emotionally. He observes. In psychological terms, this is called tactical patience. Instead of arguing immediately, powerful negotiators slow the moment down. According to negotiation research discussed by Chris Voss, silence itself becomes a strategic weapon. In fact, many successful negotiators purposely pause after statements, forcing the other side to speak more, reveal information, and lose control of the emotional rhythm. Imagine an ordinary argument, voices rising, people interrupting, emotions spiraling. Now imagine the opposite, a man who listens longer than anyone else, who speaks less than everyone else. That silence shifts power. Communication psychologists describe this as controlling the conversation frame. The person who sets the emotional tone controls the outcome. This is why elite negotiators mirror their opponents. Repeating the last few words someone says encourages them to continue talking and reveals hidden intentions. Chris Voss calls this technique mirroring, a simple psychological strategy that disarms confrontation. In the world of John Wick, power rarely comes from speeches. It comes from reputation and restraint. When Wick enters a room, most arguments end before they begin. That's not fiction alone. It reflects a real psychological principle. Behavioral research discussed in books like 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene explains that reputation shapes perception long before a confrontation even begins. If people believe you are disciplined, dangerous, or confident, they subconsciously adjust their behavior. The argument becomes psychological before it becomes verbal. But there's another layer: emotional control. Neuroscience research shows that during conflict, the brain's amygdala triggers defensive reactions, anger, shouting, impulsive responses. This is often called an amygdala hijack, a term popularized by psychologist Daniel Goleman in the field of emotional intelligence. When that happens, logical thinking weakens. The person who reacts emotionally loses strategic clarity. The person who stays calm keeps control. That difference decides arguments. This is why elite negotiators train emotional regulation the same way fighters train muscles. In the films of John Wick, Wick survives impossible situations because his reactions are disciplined, every movement controlled, every breath steady. That same principle applies in psychological conflict. When someone attacks verbally, reacting instantly often gives them the power they want. Strategic calm removes that power. Then comes the breakthrough moment, the moment when control shifts. Negotiation experts explain that asking calibrated questions forces the other person to rethink their position. Questions like, "How am I supposed to do that?" or "What makes this fair?" redirect the conversation without aggression. According to Chris Voss, these questions trigger the brain's problem-solving mode instead of its defensive mode. The argument turns into a discussion. Power moves quietly. But even masters have moments of vulnerability. The story of John Wick reminds us that control is forged through loss. The death of his wife, the destruction of the life he tried to build, the moment when criminals underestimated him. Pain created discipline, silence created power. The man who once walked away from violence was forced to return, and in that return he demonstrated something deeper than revenge: precision, emotional mastery. In reality, arguments are rarely about logic alone. They are about ego, identity, and emotional triggers. Books on persuasion consistently show that people change their minds not because they were defeated, but because they felt understood. Listening longer than others, responding calmly, asking questions instead of attacking. These are not weaknesses. They are strategic advantages. And that brings us back to the lesson hidden beneath the story. Winning arguments, Wick style, doesn't mean destroying the other person. It means controlling yourself so completely that the emotional battlefield shifts in your favor. Calm becomes influence. Silence becomes authority. Discipline becomes reputation. Most people enter arguments trying to prove they are right. Masters enter arguments trying to control the frame. The difference between those two approaches decides everything, because the most powerful person in any conflict is not the loudest voice in the room. It is the calmest mind.